A pleasure to meet all at last, and welcome back to TV shows that deserve the spotlight. Today it's Friday, and right now I feel like what we can do, especially after reviewing another new film, is that I can pretty much expand my operations here a little bit further. There's a lot of shows that I hope to talk about before I put this whole thing to rest. And after a few months of some good work, viewing, and research, I feel like that another good example that I can highlight in terms of TV shows, yeah, you know what? I feel like what we can do today is talk about something a little bit different in regards to televised content. And well, one good example I was actually able to come across a little while ago is Captain America 1944 serial. You're probably wondering, why a Republic serial instead of a TV show? Well, I would almost feel like that it actually has the same value to it. I mean, there's 15 chapters to it, which are like episodes. And when you really get down to it, the quality of the whole thing might as well have just been made on a small budget. Because across 15 chapters, Captain America and the Purple Death, as the full title itself would refer to it, stars the likes of Dick Purcell, Lorna Gray, and Lionel Atwill, the same man who has starred in a lot of the Frankenstein films back in the day. But essentially, this is the Captain America that is far different from the one that we know today. The first Avenger, the shield-wielding World War II veteran, Steve Rogers, himself. No, this is a lot different. In 1944, there was hardly that much in terms of Marvel Comics material to work with. It wasn't until much later, especially after World War II itself had ended, that gave us the true story that was heartwarming, inspiring, and strong and courageous at the same time. How we know Steve Rogers today is quite simple. He used to be a World War II veteran who got frozen in ice and then thawed out decades later, now living amongst us today. But this is District Attorney Grant Gardner, played by Dick Purcell. He is in pursuit of a doctor who goes by the identity the Scarab, as he basically leaves a scarab-like symbol indicative of Mayan-based ancient history on his victims after they're killed. It's basically the same exact thing as what we've seen in a lot of films today. There's the origami killer from Quantic Dream's Heavy Rain. There are the riddles in the Robert Pattinson's The Batman. And there's even the Zodiac killer. But this basically precedes all that stuff. While that cliche is common today, where there could be a main antagonist who's a killer that leaves behind clues or other such artifacts as to who he is in general, in this case you basically have a curator, a doctor who specializes in Mayan history. Lionel Atwill does a pretty decent job in this whole thing. Playing the villain in his own right seemed like a pretty nice way to go. I mean, we've already known him for the likes of Universal's Monster Mash, like with the Dracula and Frankenstein films, so to speak. But I guess in this case though, being that this was around the same time as those films were around, a 15-part series, if you will, whether serial or not, does in fact involve some pretty nice things here and there. So when you really get down to it, it's far different from what we've already talked about. Captain America's true arch nemesis, as we know of today, is the Red Skull, but here he's the Scarab. So again, it's a lot different. The true identity of Captain America is different. The main antagonist is different. And apart from the setting and knowing that it's black and white, far before the days of color were common, another thing is also quite different. Captain America's weapon of choice. Instead of a shield, as we know, which is his true weapon, it not only adds special layers of defense, knowing that it's made out of vibranium, he actually uses it like a weapon. I mean, he can hurl it around like a boomerang, knock his enemies around by bouncing it off of them, and also use a variety of other attacks, and even use his own gauntlets as a means to call it in. Sort of like how Thor reaches into the air to grab his Mjolnir, or Stormbreaker. But in any case though, this Captain America's weapon of choice is a revolver. That's right, he shoots his victims down. Oh man. That is one way to get the kids rolling up in the 1940s, especially when World War II was still going on. Oh man, and just to note, this was a year and a half before the war itself ended. In February 1944, I'm sure that these guys were proud of themselves. The 2 directors and the 7 writers in total that were all put together. And, you know, apart from just the fact that a lot of stuff was different, with many newer generation fans of Captain America looking at this, I could see why this was sort of left in the dust. At the time, there was hardly that much to work with. But as Marvel Comics got bigger and even better over time, of course there was a lot of things that they could do. It was no wonder why such stories like Spider-Man and the Incredible Hulk, a lot of that stuff didn't necessarily take place up until the mid-1960s. Which, believe it or not, involved another worldwide war conflict. Nam, baby. Yeah, I mean, it can't really be coincidental by any means. But it sure is quite a way to pique at our curiosity, isn't it? Anyways, though, the story itself, as I've said, you have Captain America, a gun-wielding district attorney in disguise, basically, and a Scarab, Lionel Atwill's own villainous performance, apart from the many appearances he's made back then. They're basically at it against each other, basically. You have Gardner attempting to solve the mystery relating to the Scarab, and you basically have the Scarab himself basically setting up a massive scene. You got a scene with a lot of victims on his hands. Victims whom are apparently witnesses to a thing known as the Purple Death. This Purple Death in question is supposedly a curse bring about by ancient history relating to the Mayan people. And supposedly the Scarab wants to use this Purple Death as a means of eradicating people. So when you really get down to it, mystery, crime, and drama relating to solving and thwarting a conspiracy in the town. Throughout all 15 of the chapters, we do get to see the secretary, whom is played by Lorna Gray, get captured from time to time, interrogated and possibly held hostage in some potential degrees. But of course we know Captain America is out to save her in many different ways. There's lots of epic fighting that takes place, some car scenes. I mean, those kind of vehicles from the 1940s, they sure as heck were stylish at that time. Quite common, of course, and extremely affordable. So when you get down to it, though, other details are still in play. To create this entire series cost in total $182.6 thousand in 1944. But when adjusted for inflation, ballpark estimate, almost 80 to 90 years later, well, you have yourself a good old $3.2 million. Wow. That's insane. $182.6 thousand amounts to $3.2 million nowadays. So that itself is a pretty epic layer of creativity. So they must have had a big budget at that point in time. But in the end, this is just one of those shows that truly has been dragged under for a while. Certainly because Captain America himself has changed as a character, as a story, and most importantly, as a superhero. He doesn't need a cape, he doesn't need to fly, and he doesn't need to shoot laser beams from his eyes. He is simply a natural strength and speed and agility, all put together. All these different abilities of any sorts made into one small package. A former veteran of 2 different kinds of wars, especially the second one that involved a whole world full of cruel people, led by a cruel Führer, if you will. Oh man, and that doesn't even begin to cover what Captain America is as we know today. But just knowing the fact, this preceded a lot of Captain America related material based on both television and movie standards. As we know today, he is a popular Avenger amongst the likes of Iron Man, the Incredible Hulk, Spider-Man, Thor, Doctor Strange, Captain Marvel, etc. And you know, speaking of Captain Marvel, I feel like I could talk about the first Shazam related series known as the Adventures of Captain Marvel, but I guess that could probably wait until another time. So, I guess with that in mind, thank you very much for watching this piece, and stay tuned for more. Like, subscribe, comment, follow me wherever you can find me, and stay on the Hollywood side if you'd like to see more.